Conservatives like us support the free market, and for good reason. The free market works. But there's nothing free about this market. A lot of these companies operate as monopolies. They hate markets. They use government regulation to crush competition. There's nothing conservative about that, just as there's nothing conservative about most big corporations. Just the opposite. They are the backbone of the left.
You were just coming off of Pride Month, where almost all of the big companies were applying some sort of rainbow flag or having some sort of ad, being involved in Pride Month. It's almost like an arms race, because if other companies are doing it and you don't, let's say you're a brand of beer who doesn't participate with any kind of Pride ad campaign and Budweiser does, then the question becomes, well, are you against Pride? Are you against LGBT folks or LGBT rights? And so it's really an unusual and unique phenomenon, and there's an awful lot of mimicry going on. But here's the thing. I don't think these companies are doing so because of government per se. In other words, I think they're leading. I think we can learn something here from Michael Malice in his book where he talks about the cathedral and these sort of viewpoints that are coming down from on high, generally in universities. I think that has very much infected corporate America as well. So, of course, there's plenty of hypocrisy to go around. In other words, all of a sudden, Tom, all of our friends on the left are not so worried about corporate power. They think it's just A-OK, and these are private companies just doing what they want to do. I think there's a very strong sense amongst millennials that you don't separate life into personal and professional and religious, that everything is all kind of blended together in one. You want your companies to reflect your work, to reflect your education, and there's not these distinctions that maybe you and I grew up with, where your parents said, never talk about religion or politics or sex to a stranger. That all those old prescriptions seem to be falling away, and now everything is utterly politicized. It's really it's almost shocking, and of course, social media amplifies and intensifies this and makes everything so immediate and so harsh. Just in the last couple of days, we've seen this thing with Colin Kaepernick, who has been involved with Nike as a spokesman. And let me just say, I didn't mind the Colin Kaepernick take a knee protest. I don't really care about the national anthem, and I don't really care about flag waving, and I especially don't like military stuff at football games. And now I'm a little offended by, I think that the notion that America is a deeply racist country, I think that's nonsense. And I think that's just not true. I think America is one of the least racist places in the world. And maybe not the least, but among the least. But nonetheless, Colin Kaepernick thought he was standing up for Black folks who have been abused by cops, and he takes a knee. I think that's fine. Now, the question becomes, should Nike embrace this, or should Nike steer clear of this in a spokesman? Well, Phil Knight and other people at Nike decided to embrace it and ultimately took him on, kept him as a spokesman, and presumably paid him sponsorship fees during some years where he was not making an NFL salary, I might add. So that's very interesting to me. But now we find out that Nike was prepared to produce a new shoe with the Betsy Ross flag sewn on the back of it, on the heel or something like that, which is interesting. It'd be funny if they had to sew the flag of the country where it was made. We'd all be walking around with clothes that had Bangladeshi and Vietnamese flags on them. But nonetheless, they were going to make this shoe with a Betsy Ross flag, which, by the way, violates the flag code. Some of you might know 4 USC Section 8 in the 1940s during World War II was passed into law. You're not supposed to have flags on your clothing, but it's not enforced. And so Colin Kaepernick somehow persuades Nike not to produce this shoe. Now that's fascinating to me. This is a couple years after the Take a Knee controversy, because even the Betsy Ross American flag now represents some sort of Americanism which offends him or potentially offends people with whom he agrees. Now, this is amazing to me, because now we're talking about the next level of wokeness. We're talking about the American flag, the garden variety stars and stripes American flag, almost being downgraded to the point of like the Confederate flag, which of course has all kinds of connotations to the Civil War, and Black people don't like it. A lot of people who aren't Black don't like it. And so this is really interesting to me, because now we've reached the point where, it used to be American history prior to the Civil War is null and void because of slavery. Well, now, the next revolution and all that is American history prior to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is null and void. So now what's next? I mean, if we can't have American flags on a shoe, and the fact that a company like Nike, I mean, we're not talking about some minor company here. We're not talking about a pillow manufacturer who advertises on Sean Hannity's show. We're talking about an iconic American brand. I mean, Nike is up there with Levi's and Harley Davidson and Coca-Cola. And yet they have taken a side on this. And there's going to be a lot of right-wing sort of yeehawism over the next 2 days, 3 days, however short the news cycle is now before we forget everything and rush to the next thing, where a lot of people on the right are going to say, screw you, Nike. I'm never buying another pair of Nikes. I embrace the flag. The American flag is a symbol of greatness, and we saved the world in World War II, and yada, yada, yada. I mean, what kind of business practice is this? The only way you can explain this and Nike's decision, well, there's two ways. One is that they're just ideologically aligned with Kaepernick, and they agree with him and damn the consequences. But the other is that we're really experiencing a profound shift where Nike is actually understanding and gauging the future correctly and going with it. So this is all happening so quickly. It's just not the America that we all thought we knew 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That's what strikes me as the pace of it all. What's so astonishing here, though, is you gotta hand it to the left. Now, I use the term woke exactly in the opposite way. To me, someone who's woke is someone who's maybe a Hoppe and ANCAP, who's really read Rothbard and has sort of had the blinders fall off their eyes. Not someone who is spoon-fed a bunch of egalitarian nonsense from Twitter or wherever they consume it. But yes, when it comes to wokeness, you got to hand it to the left, because in a sense, they really do put the progressive movement ahead of profits. Now, of course, maybe they're calculating that in the long run, this is the best thing to do, for their bottom line. But in the short term, you sometimes have to admit that some of these companies are perhaps alienating part of Trump America or alienating part of Christian America or whatever it might be, whatever the particular issue is. And there's something pretty profound there, that there's a bottom line ahead of profits. And I think that's something we have to give them credit for, and we have to think about. I mean, how do you change the world? Rothbard argued for a multi-pronged approach, and the left is doing just that. They do what they can do legislatively. What they can't do legislatively at the local level, they might do nationally. What they can't do nationally, they might do at the judiciary. What they can't do in court, they might do at the corporate level. So it's a full court press. And I would say generally it's working. I think the left has won the culture wars. And I think that is now evidenced in corporate America. I don't think there's any question about it, Tom.